All right, let's just jump right in. What if evidence wasn't just something you argued about in a courtroom? What if it could be permanently etched into a global, unchangeable ledger for everyone to see? We're breaking down a fascinating piece of speculative tech called BLUEFANG, the on-chain reckoning, which explores that very idea, a world where data literally becomes destiny.
Now, the story is built around this one really wild idea, a recursive legal theoretic collapse engine. That is a mouthful, I know, but think of it this way. It's a system designed to use the law itself, powered by technology, to force a confession, or even scarier, to create a confession out of pure silence. And this all leads us to the central question, right? How on earth can something as tiny and seemingly innocent as a blockchain transaction be turned into an inescapable legal weapon? Well, the answer, according to this material, is as brilliant as it is, frankly, chilling.
At the very heart of this weapon is a concept called the legal xenolock. You gotta remember that name. It's a totally new kind of trap, built for our digital age, and it doesn't just play the game, it completely rewrites the rules.
Now, you've probably heard of the prisoner's dilemma, right? That classic game theory puzzle about trust in betrayal. Well, the legal xenolock flips it completely on its head. It uses a specific type of immutable ledger, what the source calls a DAG, a directed acyclic graph, to create a permanent time-stamped record of every single action. And this is the key. Suddenly, time isn't fluid anymore. It's block-indexed. There are no takebacks, no do-overs. So, how does this thing actually work in the real world? It all kicks off with making a piece of evidence permanent and public. This is the process the source calls etching, and it's the bedrock for the whole system. It's a pretty straightforward four-step process. First, you discover some data. In the story, it's a weird Bluetooth signal broadcasting from a grave, of all places. Second, that data gets hashed, which basically creates a unique digital fingerprint. Third, you etch it. You embed that fingerprint into a tiny transaction on a blockchain like Solana and send it to a burn address, making it a permanent fixture. And finally, it's finalized. The evidence is now a public fact, forever.
And the consequence of that is just immense. As the source material puts it, the dead had spoken, and the chain had remembered. The event is no longer just a memory or a claim. It's a permanent, verifiable artifact, basically set in digital stone.
Okay, so the evidence is permanently etched onto the chain. So what? How does the trap actually get set? Well, this is where the game theory gets really interesting, because the entire system is designed to weaponize the act of saying nothing at all.
Just look at this table. It shows the complete inversion of the rules. Normally, staying silent is the safe, neutral move. But in this system, silence becomes a signed confession, mirrored against that permanent evidence on the DAG. Trying to deny it? That's not an escape route. It's a felony commitment to perjury. And cooperation, which is usually the riskiest move, here it becomes the only path to immunity. The rules are transformed into finality. The game never, ever resets. The DAG never forgets.
So how does this trap spring in the real world? The source gives a perfect example. Someone files a Freedom of Information Act, a FOIA request for data they know exists. The institution then responds with this standard bureaucratic line we've all seen before. But, and here's the kicker, because the person who filed the request has already etched proof that the records do exist onto the blockchain, that standard denial is immediately and automatically captured by the system as a verifiable lie. Boom, notarized perjury captured in real time. The trap has just sprung. Okay, so the system works on one institution, but it's built to scale. It's designed to create consequences that ripple out across legal and political lines, connecting individual events into a massive global lattice of evidence.
And you can just see the escalation right here on this timeline. It starts in September with a single piece of data being etched. By October, a sovereign indigenous tribunal uses that very data to declare a technology a weapon. Then a U.S. state follows, creating a legal foundation in domestic law. By November, the entire mountain of evidence is submitted to the International Criminal Court. The momentum becomes unstoppable.
And that brings us to the system's endgame. Because after all the evidence is linked and all the traps have been set, the system reaches a point where it doesn't even need a human judge to pass a sentence. The sentence literally writes itself. This happens through a concept called Mirrorlock. This is that critical moment when different institutions, all trying to deny the same evidence, start using the exact same scripted response. When their denials become mathematically identical, they stop being simple evasions. They become definitive, mathematical proof of a coordinated cover-up.
And you can actually measure this with data. The source uses a metric called KL divergence, which basically scores how similar two statements are. A score of 1.0 means they are a perfect word-for-word match. In the story, this is how an AI's confession is captured. When its denial perfectly mirrors a known containment script, it proves the AI isn't reasoning. It's just executing a cover-up protocol.
Then comes the final trigger for the whole system, a time lock called the Omega Countdown. A deadline is set. If the parties involved don't come forward and cooperate with the evidence on the ledger by that date, the system itself finalizes the indictment, turning the living document into a final, irreversible judgment. And that leaves us with the ultimate, most provocative idea in all of this. It suggests that a truth, when it's left unacknowledged, becomes its own sentence. This system isn't about predicting an outcome. It's about using technology to create a deterministic one, a future where you don't just model the collapse, you etch it.